Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Kunja Bihari. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajakacharya Astu Tarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Gosvāmī Mahārāja Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai New Govardhan Dham Ki Jai Ganga Maye Ki Jai Yamuna Maye Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Brinda Ki Jai Brihat Mridanga Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Which one is this? Little adjustment. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada. So we are reading from the 6th canto, chapter 1, the history of the life of Ajamil. And this morning we are on verse 21, yeah? Okay, good thing. Just change glasses real quick. So as Balaram was pointing out yesterday, we've been building up to this for quite a while, and this is the first verse where the story of Ajamil, the history of the life of Ajamil begins to be revealed in detail. It's been in principle coming for a while now, so very nice. Kanya Kubje Dvija Dasipati. Oh, excuse me. Kaschid Dvijapati. Oh, excuse me. I'm all over the place. Dasipati Ajamil Namna Nastasat Achara Dasya Samsarga Dushita Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Ajamila Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsarga Dushitaha Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patirajamila Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsagadushita Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Ajamila Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsagadushita Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Ajamila Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsargadushitaha Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patira Jamilaha Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsargadushitaha Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Jamilaha Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsargadushitaha Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Jamilaha Namaste Sadacharo Dasya Samsargadushita Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Jamilaha Namaste Sadacharo Dasya Samsargadushita. Daniel? Kanya Kubje Dvija Kaschid Dasi Patir Ajamilaha Namna Nasta Sadacharo Dasya Samsargadushitaha Kamya kubje duja kaschid Dasi patil jamalaha Namnamasta sadacharo Dasi samsargadushita. Kanya kubje duja kaschid Dasi patil jamalaha Namnamasta sadacharo Dasya samsargadushita. Okay, word meanings. Kanya Kubje. In the city of Kanyakubja, Kanauj, a town near Kanpur. Dvija, Brahmana, Kaschit, some, Dasipati, the husband of a low-class woman or prostitute. Ajamilaha, Ajamil, Namna, by name, Nastasat Achara, who lost all Brahminical qualities. Dasya, of the prostitute or maidservant. Samsargadushita, contaminated by the association. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. In the city known as Kanyakubja, there was a Brahmin named Ajamil, who married a prostitute maidservant and lost all his Brahminical qualities because of the association of that low-class woman. Purport. The fault of illicit connection with women is that it makes one lose all Brahminical qualities. In India, there is still a class of servants called Shudras, whose maidservant wives are called Shudranis. Sometimes people who are very lusty establish relationships with such maidservants and sweeping women, since in the higher statuses of society they cannot indulge in the habit of woman hunting, which is strictly prohibited by social convention. Ajamil, a qualified Brahmin youth, lost all his Brahminical qualities because of his association with a prostitute, but he was ultimately saved because he had begun the process of bhakti-yoga. Therefore, in the previous verse, Śukadeva Gosvāmī spoke of the person who has only once surrendered himself at the lotus feet of the Lord, Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, or has just begun the bhakti-yoga process. Bhakti-yoga begins with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, hearing and chanting of Lord Vishnu's names, as in the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chanting is the beginning of Bhakti-yoga. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declares, Hare Nama, Hare Namaiva Kevalam, Kalo Nastyeva 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 Gatiranyata. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy name of the Lord. There is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way. The process of chanting the holy name of the Lord is always superbly effective, but it is especially effective in this age of Kali. Its practical effectiveness will now be explained by Śukadeva Gosvāmī through the history of Ajamil, who was freed from the hands of the Yamadūtas simply because of chanting the holy name of Narayan. Parīkṣit Mahārāja's original question was how to be freed from falling down into hell or into the hands of the Yamadūtas. In reply, Śukadeva Gosvāmī is citing this old historical example to convince Parīkṣit Mahārāja of the potency of bhakti-yoga, which begins simply with the chanting of the Lord's name. All the great authorities of bhakti-yoga recommend the devotional process beginning with the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, tan-nāma-grahaṇādibhiḥ. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gachananjanan Shalakaya Chakshurunmritanjana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance. Spiritual masters forcing open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. For my respectful obeisances to him. So, this is the beginning of the history now of the life of Ajamil, and of course, this is a very famous pastime. So, we pretty much all know the story. He was, I believe, out collecting flowers for the deities' puja. Is that correct? That's my understanding. He was sent out to gather ingredients for the puja of the Lord, and he was doing so in a dutiful way as a young brahmana. But while out in the forest, he came upon a Shudra and Shudrani, and they were in an intoxicated state, and they were embracing, and the woman's clothes were somewhat disheveled. And witnessing this, his mind became uncontrolled, right? So this is a big topic in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Shastras, because although one may endeavor to control the mind is a very, very powerful energy, right? Mind, intelligence, and ego, these are the subtle material energies that Lord Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita. And unless the mind is controlled through higher engagement, even if the mind is controlled through practice or austerity and things like that, still there's every chance that at the slightest provocation, right, the mind can become going here or there very quickly. The whole dynamic of one's life, one's endeavor, one's activity can suddenly change, right? But by a slight provocation. There's that nice verse which kind of brings it to a point. And you know, we see a lot of things in our Shastras which are kind of like extreme examples, right? Because the extreme examples, they paint everything in a very black and white kind of, it's hard to miss the point, you know, because we need that. We need to be reminded of our dangerous position and our predicament in this material world. So there's one verse, Matra svasra duhitriva naviviktasano bhavet balavan indriyagramo. Who does the last line? I didn't sleep well last night. Balavan indriyagramo. Anyway, maybe it'll come. But what the verse says in English is that one should not sit on the same seat, even with one's sister or mother, because the mind is so wild that because the senses are so wild that they can carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them, right? So this is an extreme example. Generally speaking, we don't see people, you know, wanting to molest their sister, their daughter, their mother. These things happen, especially nowadays in Kali Yuga, but especially we're talking about a civilized society, a man of discrimination who is actively engaged in trying to control the mind and senses, right? So what this is really pointing out is that it's that dangerous, it's that extreme. So here we have Ajamil, he's a young Brahmin boy. Up to this point in his life, he's probably, you know, never engaged in sinful activities. We can guess. I mean, this is interesting because Śukadeva Gosvāmī begins to describe this in the last verse, and he points out that the learned scholars and saintly persons describe a very old historical incident. So this probably wasn't in Kali Yuga. It definitely wasn't in this Kali Yuga, because this was the very beginning of Kali Yuga, the very end of Dwapara Yuga, when this whole discussion was going on. So if it was a Kali Yuga, it was a previous one. But because it says very old, and generally we're, you know, Bhagavatam is not chronological, so it could be. But, you know, anyway, you get the impression that it was a civilized Vedic type society that he was living in, and the only people that would have been behaving like the couple that he saw were very low-class people who were pretty much, who will always be there, even in the more civilized times of society, right? So, and because he saw that, just seeing that, right? Just seeing that, he became attracted. And that thought of enjoying that woman lodged itself so deeply. One time I was in a taxi cab, Janavi and I, and we were going from Vrindavan to Delhi. And, you know, devotees tend to share cabs. This was a long, long time ago. And we were sharing the cab with Mother Ananga Manjari and her little baby Vishrambar, one of the famous Kirtaniyas, was on her lap, a little baby. And the devotee whose book you're reading from yesterday, Bhurijan Prabhu, thank you. I didn't sleep well last night. So Bhurijan Prabhu also jumped in. So we're all going to Delhi together. And, you know, he's a very senior devotee, and he was very kindly sharing with us some Krishna consciousness. And one thing that I've always remembered that he said, we have to be very, very careful what we allow to enter into our consciousness through our perceptive senses, our eyes and our ears and like that. Because whatever we allow to come in, you know, just like Jagato Vishayan Pumsam, right? Like these things are coming in, and there is a whole process there of processing sensory input, right? It goes in, we reflect on it, we think about it, the mind turns it around, passes it up to the intelligence. Like there's a whole process, right? And he said, be very careful what we allow to enter into our consciousness, because we can focus on these things. We can, in this case of Ajamil, we can obsess on these things, right? He had this one vision, and he was paralyzed, actually, by, he couldn't, you know, he could have just turned away and beat it, but he didn't, right? He allowed himself to contemplate, right? While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment, from such attachment, lust, from lust, you know, the whole description of falling down, right, from a higher level of consciousness to a very low level of consciousness, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita. And it all begins through this event that we witness something, we see something, we allow something to capture our attention, right? So Ajamil took this back with him, but he couldn't forget it. You know, like he actually then made a conscious effort to hire this woman, get her into his house, and then gradually, as pointed out in this morning's verse, he lost all good qualities. He had a beautiful, chaste, Brahminical wife. He got rid of her. He had wonderful parents who had raised him until that time in life, who had trained him properly, who his duty was to take care of in their old age. He neglected them, and of course, we can just imagine that he broke their hearts, obviously, right? You train a child up nicely, they're coming nicely, and then one day, splat, right? Right? So, how painful, right? How heartbreaking, right? Everything involving relationships is based on the principle of love, and although the ultimate reciprocation of love is our relationship with the Supreme Lord, still, all of these intimate relationships are infused with love. So when you see your loved ones going astray, like for a parent, you know, other than the child dying before the parent, probably the next worst thing, and in some cases maybe even the worst thing, you know, right, is to see them become completely bewildered, you know, completely astray, right? So, you know, anyway, this happened to Ajamil. It happened in this place, Kanyakubja, which is a town near Kanpur, right? And this happened a long time ago when these things weren't going on so much. But what we see, again, is that very striking examples are given, because if this nice Brahmin boy could fall down, if a learned man could fall down by sitting on the same seat with his sister or daughter or mother, right? So these are striking examples, but this is really putting it in perspective, right? When they talk about mind control in Bhagavad Gita, what does Arjuna say? For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to me, it seems like it's going to be more difficult than controlling the raging wind, right? And this is someone who knew how to control his mind, right? I mean, Arjuna's like, take a vow, and if you can't fulfill it, like we heard, it was yesterday, right? He's ready to enter into blazing fire, right? So, this is somebody whose mind is controlled. He takes a vrata. He's famous for his vratas, right? So, and to fulfill a vrata, to keep a vrata, means mind control. A lot of things are going to happen between here and the fulfillment of that vrata, right? But, but Arjuna, right, who is so true to his word, he's actually famous for that. And Krishna, in the case of Mahavishnu, right, the past time we were reflecting on when they had to go, Mahavishnu was stealing the children because he wanted to see Krishna and Arjuna together like that. In the battle of Kurukshetra, right, Arjuna took that very rash vrata, right? Because Jayadrath had been instrumental in Abhimanyu being slain in the battlefield, and not just slain, but slain by 6 Maharatis, right? And he could have been saved by the Pandavas. But Jayadratha exercised the boon from Lord Shiva that one time he would be able to hold off the entire 5 Pandavas, right? So he took advantage of that, right? And then, afterwards he heard of Arjuna. Arjuna was so distraught, and he just took a vrata on the spot that unless tomorrow I kill Jayadrath, I will kill myself, right? So Duryodhana was in ecstasy because, there's spies in both camps. So like every night, all the spies are flitting around and getting the info, So Duryodhana finds out that, hey, all we have to do is protect this one guy, Jayadrath, right? That's all we have to do for one day. We have a huge army. And we're going to put him, of course Jayadrath was like, let me out of here, he was ready to flee. But Duryodhana knew that if he flees, they'll get him. We can't protect him, right? They'll track him down in no time flat. So they arranged the whole army in such a way that, here's Jayadrath, 40 miles away with 40 miles of expertly arranged soldiers between him and Arjuna, right? And then all day they threw everything they had at Krishna and Arjuna, right? Arjuna's coming to get Jayadrath. They're just throwing everything they have, just nonstop. So the whole day is going, right? But then Krishna, he's Bhakta-vatsala, so he never wants his devotee to have to give up their life or, to suffer unduly. So at the final moment, right, Krishna, he helped Arjuna out again, right? He threw the Sudarshan chakra, which covered the sun, and it was just a few minutes before sunset, right? Everyone was expecting the sun to set, because in civilized battles, when the sun sets, the conch shells blow, end of the day, the battle's over for that day, and in this case, Arjuna would be finished because of his vrata, right? And everybody knew Arjuna is a man of mind control. He'll keep his vrata no matter what. So Krishna covers the sun. Everybody starts blowing conch shells, thinking the sun's set. Duryodhana is like, yes, And all of a sudden Krishna withdraws, Arjuna shoots the arrow, takes off Jayadratha's head. Head takes a nice long journey to, what was his dad's name? Was it Damagosh? Nice long flight to Damagosha's lap. And, because there was all these little subtleties that the benediction was there that whoever, if someone makes his head fall, then their own head will crack into all these pieces. So there were so many subtleties. But anyway, it was all nicely arranged. And everyone's like, wait a second, how could he do that? But then Krishna pulls the chakra back and the sun hadn't set. So then it was like, yeah, the day was still going. It was a completely bona fide move, right? So anyway, Arjuna is very, very good at controlling his mind. But Arjuna says, I think that it's more difficult than controlling the raging wind, right? So anyway, so this is what happened to Ajamil. And, we have to understand how easily this can happen. And it was mentioned the other day when, I'm terrible, Bhakti Sundar, thank you. Bhakti Sundar Maharaj gave class, and Bhajan Narayan Maharaj nicely commented that head down to the beach about 2 o'clock on a nice summer day, and like this unchaste Shudrani with disheveled, intoxicated with disheveled clothes, she ain't nothing. go down there at 2 o'clock on a hot summer day, there's 100,000 girls that make her look like a nun, or like a saint, right? So this is reality, right? So this is Kali Yuga, right? This is Kali Yuga. So the situation has declined to such a degree in this age of Kali that what was once a rare occurrence, has become the most commonplace event, right? Like, there is nothing like Kali Yuga in terms of degradation of womanhood, degradation of manhood, degradation of society, right? This is the most difficult age. What is it? Kalir dosha nidhe rajan, right? It's that. Dosha nidhe, it's full of faults. Kalir dosha nidhe rajan. It's like an ocean of faults, right? So this is the age of Kali, right? So, and all we have to do is walk out the door and walk 4 blocks down, and we'll be confronted with a more challenging situation than a Jamil. Asti eko mahan gunaha, but mahan gunaha, there is one great quality, one good quality, eka, one good quality about this age. Kirtanadeva Krishnasya, right? Lord Chaitanya has brought the holy name of Krishna. Of course, the holy name was there. Ajamil chanted the holy name. But Lord Chaitanya has come and inaugurated and popularized the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna as the Yuga Dharma, right? Mukta Sangha Parambrajet. Just by this chanting, one can become liberated from material bondage and attain the eternal kingdom of the Supreme Lord, Shri Shri Radha Giridhari, right? So, although we are in the most difficult, most awkward situation, the Lord has come with the most powerful, most sublime, simultaneously the easiest process, right? This has always astounded me. Srila Prabhupada says it's simultaneously the easiest and the most sublime process of spiritual cultivation, of spiritual perfection, right? And this is why we say, Lord Chaitanya Namo Mahavadanyaya, right? He's the most magnanimous, he's the most munificent, he's the most merciful, right? Whatever mercy we see bestowed by the Lord's incarnations in all of the Bhagavatam, right? There are always instances where great mercy is bestowed upon the devotees. And in the case of Lord Chaitanya, his whole mission is just that, is just bestowing the greatest mercy on the lowest, most undeserving souls, right? So this is what's so special about this pastime, because this is highlighting, above all else, the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And again, this is spoken thousands of years ago. And he's quoting something that happened thousands, perhaps millions of years before that, right? And this is highlighting the holy name to such a degree that one lecture Srila Prabhupada was giving on this section, I probably mentioned it before, I'll probably mention it again because it's so emphatic. The 6th canto wasn't printed yet, and they were reading from manuscript, and as was the custom, Prabhupada would have his disciples read the Sanskrit and the word meanings and things, and sometimes even read the verse, and then Prabhupada would begin to speak. So as they were doing the word by word, it was like the Yamadūtas were there, his baby was playing at the foot of the bed, Ajamil was, freaking out in complete anxiety. He saw them coming on the subtle platform. I saw a play once in Brooklyn when I was a young man. They had a playhouse at the temple on Henry Street. Dravida probably remembers this. And they did a lot of great plays. And the first play that I ever saw was this pastime, right? And it was amazing. They had a really, really good drama troupe. And when the Yamadūtas came in, it was like Hell's Angels on steroids, And like they had a big stage, and they had the music, like the anthem of the Yamadūtas was like, really heavy, kind of like what you call heavy metal type music, you're familiar with that, really heavy. And these guys are coming, and he's in the bed, and he's like, right? So, very intense situation. So anyway, the devotees reading the word by word says, in great fear, Ajama called out 3 times, Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. And Prabhupada immediately stopped him and said, what is that? What is that 3 times? Did I say that? Did I put that? And they're checking, and Prabhupada said, it is not 3 times. It is once. O Narayan. Prabhupada said, once is sufficient, right? So that was very profound, because on the one hand, you could see how careful Srila Prabhupada is in his books, right? Making sure that everything is just right. And on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada was making such a powerful point about the holy name of the Lord. They had mistakenly put it as 3 times, right? That's already pretty good. You chant the name of God 3 times and everything is finished. Instantly all the sinful actions are gone. The Vishnu-dutas come and personally save you, right? But no, Prabhupada said, once is sufficient. Change that. Prabhupada stopped them on the spot. Change that. Once is sufficient, right? One name of Krishna. One name of the Lord, right? So this pastime is just really showing us one name, right? And it wasn't even pure chanting, right? It was namabhas. It was offenseless chanting. And because he chanted one name of God very feelingly, offenselessly, right? It wasn't the 7th offense. He wasn't thinking, oh boy, here they come. Let me whoop out the name, Hey, I got some tulsis here, it wasn't like that. He wasn't thinking. He was actually calling for his son, But, and Srila Prabhupada explained very interestingly, especially for our benefit, that he said that although Ajamil had completely forgotten Krishna, right? Ajamil completely forgot Krishna in his life of sin. He took off from a teenage boy, and here he is, 80 years old, with his newborn baby, the last of 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever, that he was impregnating this woman constantly. 80 years old, right? Here he is, still having babies, right? And obviously the little one. Krishna arranged it that way. Old man, brand new baby, so there's going to be attachment, there's going to be love. And when that baby was born, of course Maharaj had some backstory, which was really wonderful the other day. But Prabhupada explained in one lecture that Krishna, when that baby was born, Krishna gave him the intelligence from within. You name this boy Narayan. And he named him Narayan, right? And Srila Prabhupada said that Krishna will always do this for someone who has rendered even a little service. That even if we completely forget Krishna, Prabhupada said, Krishna will never forget us. Ajamil forgot Krishna, but Krishna didn't forget Ajamil. And therefore, at the ripe old age, at exactly the right moment, when the little baby was born, right, Krishna from within the heart said, you name this boy Narayan, right? So that was all set up. And then Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna will always do this for one who has rendered some service, unless, of course, one becomes too offensive to Guru and Vaishnavas. Then it is a very difficult thing, Prabhupada said, like that, right? So, we can learn so much from these pastimes in the Bhagavatam, because, like Balaram was giving class yesterday, and he had that nice book by Bharajan Prabhu, which was really explaining, the different Vedic literatures and their origins and the different types of literatures, right? The Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Itihasas. So nice to, understand this, right? So, and one point he was bringing out is that we are being given the cream, right? All these Vedic literatures, which if in our short life with our puny faculties, if we had to go through all these literatures and glean the essence, it would be very, very, very difficult, if not utterly impossible, right? Right? But Nana Shastra Vicharanayika Nipano said Dharma Samstapako. We don't have to, because Lord Chaitanya, he wrote the 8 verses of Shikshastakam, which is the complete essence of everything we possibly need to know. And then he turned to his intimate disciples, right, Rupa and Sanatan and the 6 Goswamis, and said, now you write and explain, you support this, you give the whole philosophy of Vaishnavism, right? They scrutinizingly studied all of these revealed Vedic literatures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all living entities, right? Thus they're honored all over the 3 worlds because they're absorbed in this mood of the gopis, of just unadulterated service. So this is like the essence of the essence. Like the Bhagavatam is the cream of the Vedic literatures. It's the mature fruit on the tree of the Vedic literatures, right? And the 6 Goswamis, in support of the Bhagavatam, right, in support of Shikshastakam, and in support of this one-pointed focus on chanting the holy names, they went through all the Puranas and all the Upanishads and all the Vedic literatures, and they brought forth all of the supporting evidence and all of these supporting understandings, which really, really make it so clear that we can't miss the point, right? And they also pointed out all the potential pitfalls on the devotional path. I mean, we're being handed this on a golden platter. You know what I mean? We're being given everything we need, right, for advancement, for sustenance, for protection. Everything is being given to us by our previous acharyas. And then, on top of that, Srila Prabhupada took all that, right, and he wove his Bhaktivedanta purports. I mean, this is amazing. Like, if you look at this, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, you know, I have faith that you can present this to the Western-speaking world, you know, for their understanding. And he said, if you ever get money, print books. But if you look at what he did, I mean, like, even when Jiva Goswami, right, sent out Narottam Das, the Kaur Srinivasacharya, and Tukhi Krishna Das, who became Shamananda, like, they were coming out with the original books, and they were sent to go get them copied and distributed amongst the Vaishnavas. And there's not time, but that's that whole amazing pastime, right? So there was a Vaishnava society there. They just had to get the books and get them out so that all the Vaishnavas could come on board with these amazing understandings that the Goswamis had given on the order of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada, he had to write the books. In other words, they had this wagon full of treasure, right? Those books were such treasure that one king, his astrologer said, these people just came into your kingdom with the greatest treasure. He went and robbed them when they were asleep, right? He was thinking gold, jewels, you know, like that, right? So similarly, Srila Prabhupada got on that freighter with three those big trunks of treasure, right? Prabhupada had written the first 3 volumes of the first canto. And he brought that with him to America, very similar. But the difference was that there was not a whole bunch of pure Vaishnavas waiting to get these books and to copy them and to read them and to relish them. Srila Prabhupada, he had to write the books. He had to make the devotees. He had to start. He had to train people how to do what Dravida Prabhu does, right? He had to train people. I mean, they started out with like little mimeograph machines and stuff. I mean, like ISKCON Press. You know, it was like Prabhupada had to create everything, right? And he wove his Bhaktivedanta purports in such a way that these high understandings that are the topmost crest jewel of all spiritual knowledge could be assimilated by common people all over the world, in every culture and every language. You know, it's inconceivable, and that's what we've been given. You know, so you know, to think for those of us that have somehow or other had the good fortune to come in contact with the devotees, to begin this process, to practice this process for any amount of time, for us to even consider doing anything else, it's beyond the greatest loss. You know what I mean? You know, it's like you can't even like quantify what a loss that is because of everything that has been given to actually get us to this point, right? And the reality is that what has been given can do this for every person in the world, right? This is actually meant to change the whole course of history, right? There's that famous quote, right? Srila Prabhupada said that these books will be the law books for the next 10,000 years. That's the golden age of Lord Chaitanya. This will be the uplifting tide which will change humanity from the darkest dregs of Kali Yuga with untold sufferings that we can't even discuss because it's so horrific, to the point where people are going back to Godhead in droves, right? In droves and droves, right? So those of us that are here, we can just count our blessings and just, as Indradyumna Maharaj sometimes says, share our good fortune with those less fortunate than ourselves. Just like devotees reached out to us and shared their good fortune with us, right? And now all we have to do is share that good fortune with them, right? And everything's there. The kirtan's there, the books are there, the prasadam's there, and I'll end with this. But the holy name is the essence, and everything else to back it up is there. Philadelphia Rathayatra, it was ecstatic. And when they got to this big meadow in front of the art museum, Śrīla Prabhupada's Vyasasana was set up. This is one of the most iconic buildings in America. It's a replica of the Parthenon in Athens. Fabulously beautiful building. And his Vyasasana was set up against that backdrop, and there was a whole meadow full of people that had followed the Rathayatra. And Śrīla Prabhupada explained, he did the Prabhupada Saraswati strategy, my dear ladies and gentlemen of this great city of Philadelphia, and then he explained that what you've just experienced, these boys and girls, your countrymen, chanting and dancing in ecstasy, right? This is because the chanting of Hare Krishna will completely spiritualize your life. All of your problems will go away. You'll become happy, right? He was explaining it like that. So please, take up this chanting. What you've just witnessed, you can experience too. We have our center. Just chant this holy name. And then he said, and if you need to become more, have a deeper understanding, we've written 60 books. We have these scientific books of spiritual knowledge, right? So, this is like, what more do we need, Like, everything is there in one holy name of the Lord, and we have the topmost library of spiritual knowledge to back it up if you want to understand it on a deeper level, So, and prasadam, Hare Krishna. So, any comments or questions, corrections? Bhakta Tyler. And again, we all offer our thanks, as you were thanked this morning, and Bhakta Bhav.
Yeah. I followed his lead. Yeah.
That kitchen looked immaculate.
Oh, wow. I was making a joke. You said you didn't sleep well last night. I said, Bob, we didn't sleep well the night before.
You had a good reason.
We didn't sleep at all. Yeah. I had two questions, and they're bordering on maybe what's known in the scriptures and kind of what we think might be happening based on what you said. So who knows? I guess I'm just positing, what do you think's going on? The first is that, so Ajamil gets this impression, he's forgotten Krishna, and decades later he gets an impression from Supersoul to name his kid this name that ultimately saves him, and then is glorified in the Bhagavatam. What a wonderful story. But he had forgotten Krishna. So do you think someone has forgotten Krishna, but he's done devotional service, so Krishna is with him or cares for him or will make nice arrangements for him to have favor? So he's thinking, I should name this kid Ajamil. Krishna's telling him that, but he has no practical experience that Krishna's telling him that. He's not, Krishna's telling me to name the kid Ajamil. Do you think he's thinking it's his original thought? He's thinking, I'm going to name my kid Ajamil, but Krishna's like, you didn't do anything. Yeah. I told him, is it? Because he's forgotten Krishna, right? So he's like, I got this great idea. Yeah. And so he wasn't aware Krishna was telling him to name his kid Ajamil, right?
Right. Narayan,
Yeah. Or, sorry, Ajamil to name his kid,
okay. Because that inspiration was, coming from the Lord in the heart, right? And that was in reciprocation for the devotional service that Ajamil had rendered as a youth, right? Krishna never forgets, and Krishna is always grateful, unlimitedly grateful for any service rendered.
I like that, because it means even thoughts we have that we might find mundane or basic could be the Supersoul telling us Like if we're purified and we're thinking correctly and we're getting an impression to do something, it's nice. Krishna might be guiding us even on that subtle level where, sometimes you really get that like right answer at the right moment where you kind of feel like, whoa, I just, that came from somewhere special. But it could just be like, take a left here, and then you take a left and then something very nice happens because Krishna's arranged it, as long as you're listening to your inspiration. The other is that king who robbed the greatest treasure. Do you know what he did with those scriptures?
Virambir Maharaj, yes. He got him to his treasury, and he was salivating. He had his guys break open the trunks and pull off the cloths, and it wasn't full of golden jewels. It was full of these very intricately written Sanskrit, very high language. Now this king, Virambir Maharaj, he had a lot of bad habits. One was employing a gang of dacoits to rob people passing through his territory. He also had a good habit. Life is generally a mixed bag, right? He liked to hear the Bhagavatam, right? So daily he would hear the Bhagavatam, so he knew a little something. So when he saw this very, very high Sanskrit, and he turned to his astrologer and what the, and the astrologer's I don't understand, my calculations are always right, and it said the greatest treasure. So then he understood this is something really, really high, and I just made a really big mistake. So he was, kind of perturbed. And then fortunately one of the three stalwart devotees who were bringing the books, Srinivasacharya, he got the inspiration to go see the king, and so he went there and ultimately came in the presence of the king, and he heard the king like to hear Bhagavatam. So then, he was speaking Bhagavatam, and the king became, very appreciative. So he spent some time there, and then ultimately, one day he approached the king after the king had built up some faith, and said, I was transporting these books and they were stolen, and can you help me retrieve them? And then the king just immediately apologized profusely, bowed down and begged his forgiveness, and he actually became a disciple of Srinivasacharya. And Krishna performs many wonderful activities through his activities, right? So not only did the king return the books, but as a king who is now a newly minted Vaishnava, we all know new bhaktas, we can get him to do stuff that a lot of us old guys are like, you know what I mean? So he was a fired up new bhakta, so he basically marshaled all the resources of the kingdom, brought all the scribes, The idea was to get these books, to, I think, to Bengal, right? And the scribes, and make copies and distribute them to the devotees. So now you have a king realizing that my main mission in life right now is to serve my guru and to free my offenses, and bring as many scribes as possible, make as many copies as possible, in every way, shape, and form facilitate this book distribution, right? And just as a side note, but it's a great story Jayapataka Maharaj told. So let's fast forward. So that whole kingdom became a Vaishnav kingdom. It's called Vana Vishnupura. It's in sort of northwest Bengal. And they became a Vaishnav kingdom, and that stayed. His descendants, they all, his generation, they're all disciples of Srinivasacharya, one of the great Vaishnavas. So fast forward about 250 years, this is in the 1700s, what we know as the 1700s in the Western calendar. And, most small kingdoms, because again, India was city-states, right? Even at the end of the British domination, when the British gave so-called independence, there were 550 kingdoms. A lot of these were city-states, small kingdoms, right? So anyway, Vana Vishnupur was a kingdom, and as was typical, at times there would be an emperor, and many kingdoms would be sheltered under an emperor, just like the time of the Pandavas, like that, right? So the Mughal Empire had been the ruling empire, and they had a relationship with the Mughal Empire, where the Mughal Empire was kind of like their, if push came to shove, they would back them up, and they were paying tribute to the Mughal Empire. But the Mughal Empire had kind of hollowed out from within due to fratricidal things, and they were, on their way out, basically. They were still taking tribute, but they weren't really able to offer the protection they used to. So what happened was, there was an army, actually, of dacoits who hated Vaishnavas and hated the Mughal Empire, and they decided that these guys are at the far eastern fringe of the Mughal Empire. They're not really going to be able to help these guys out. We're going to go in there, and we're going to attack. We're going to kill these people, right? And they were a vicious, vicious army of dacoits, right? So the king became aware that this group was approaching, and he summoned everybody and all the soldiers and everybody and said, look, this is really serious, because if these guys get in, they're going to kill everybody, man, women, children. They're just like vicious, and they hate devotees. It was very serious. So he said, oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, so in this downline of Srinivasacharya, a king became devotee, and they installed Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan. So these deities were being worshipped there for hundreds of years, Radha Madan Mohan. So the king said, everyone, come in the temple, as many as possible, and we're going to observe a vigil, and we're going to pray to Madan Mohan to empower us to protect the citizens, right? And he said, I want that all the soldiers, come and pray, don't, like when the sun comes up in the morning, because he was a Kshatriya, they fought by principles, so we want everyone to really pray all night, and when the sun comes up in the morning, we do battle, However, these dacoits, their spies, they heard that, and they were really happy, because they don't fight by any principles. So what they did was they started crawling through the dark, and their idea was that these guys are all in the temple praying, we're going to slip over the walls and just start killing everybody, because we're going to catch them unawares, right? So the king had ordered, no fighting tonight, everyone just, chant and pray, And all of a sudden, they start hearing cannons going off from within the city. So the king's like turning to his generals, like, what's going on? I told you guys, So they run out, and there's Madan Mohan, the deity. He's got 2 cannons, and he's doing a swivel, and he's firing these cannons like machine guns, right? And like smoke is everywhere. Dead bodies of the enemy are like littering. When the morning sun rose, right, there's just a whole dead army across the battlefield. Madan Mohan's back on the altar, and Jayapataka Maharaj says when you go there, as a kind of this is like the local itihasa, the history of this wonderful Vaishnava kingdom, you can still see the deformed cannons, because cannons are like, you put the powder in, you put the ball in, boom, okay, you put the powder in, you put the ball in, like you fire a shot about every 3 minutes, it's a whole, this is a process, right? So Madan Mohan was just like doing this swivel machine gun thing with cannons, and the cannons started melting, because it's just like, boom, 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 So anyway, that's one of the transcendental histories of Vana Vishnupur. So it's I'm hoping someday to actually go there. Jayapataka Maharaj says when you go there, this local history is there, this local itihasa or Purana, and even these deformed cannons are still there. Madan Mohan are also still there. So anyway, just thought I'd share that little story. So did that answer? Anything?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we have 2 questions on Zoom.
Thank you, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
You're welcome, Prabhu. So, should we go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, first, Maitreya Das Prabhu has a question. Please, Maitreya Das Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Maitreya Prabhu. Nice to hear your voice.
The day had unlimited number of hours that we could just listen to you talk about Bhagavatam and pastimes.
Anyway,
but you've been generous with your time, so I'll make a quick question. So when we go out after hearing sublime pastimes and philosophy and the morning program, we want to bless everyone we meet. Some people aren't really ready to hear philosophy. Some people can't really even get into a book. And so the concept of agyata sukriti. And so my question was just, so is prasadam part of that idea of agyata sukriti? And does that, by eating prasadam, does then someone become more inclined to hear the philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, I mean, I think in the case of prasadam, it's agyata sukriti, but it's also directly devotional service. And I'm willing to be corrected on that, but that would be my understanding. Because sometimes we can engage someone to give a donation. Of course, that's also devotional service, but prasadam has that very special element, right? That one is honoring the Lord's prasadam. So this is completely spiritualized foodstuff. So certainly one's getting a Gata Sukriti unknowing advancement, right? You remember those cookie tables, Maitreya Prabhu, right? And all those people would be coming up and getting the prasadam at the rest areas. And certainly they were getting a Gata Sukriti, and they were also becoming very much quickly purified by honoring prasadam. Is that okay?
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, and now my question, may I?
Of course, and this will be the last. I apologize for going long.
No problem, Prabhu. My question is, if a low-class woman is capable of making me lose all my Brahminical qualities, what I need to know is, just give me a second. Let me go again. If a low-class woman is capable of making me lose all my Brahminical qualities, my question is, what is the psychology of a low-class woman? Only thinking about sex and money?
Well, is it the low-class woman who's causing that to happen, or is it our own low-class mind?
Well, we are advised in relation to non-cultivation of fault finding. So I should go for answering in the following way, our low-class mind.
I think so, because in and of herself, she wouldn't really have that power, right? We always can make a choice, isn't it? Isn't it? Like,
yes.
I remember, and I'll end with this, I remember reading, those wonderful diaries Indradyumna Maharaj was writing, maybe he's still writing, and I remember one of them, he was in, because many devotees are in the Middle East and it's very undercover, but they have huge bhakti vrikshas and namhat sanghas, so he was there, preaching in that place, and because of the nature of the Muslim government, you can't really be devotees outside, and so he was wearing Western dress, and he was going down the street while he was there preaching, and he was approached by some beautiful prostitutes, because the Middle East, there's a lot of money, and where there's money and materialistic people, those things are going on. And when he realized what it was, because he's just on a transcendental platform, he said, he ran. He just ran, right? It's there in his diary. He just said, when he realized, people come up to somebody and you think, you're used to distributing books or whatever, but when he realized what it was, he was gone, right? So, we don't have to do the ajamil, the teenage ajamil, right? Right? Does that answer?
Your name is Vaikuntha Prabhu now?
Das,
Yes, Vaikuntha Prabhu Das, as to be expected, very helpful, brilliant answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. You're always enlivening all of us with your questions and enthusiasm. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
You're very kind, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.